In a high-end boutique in Soho, Maya Patel, a 28-year-old retail worker, was about to face the unraveling of her family's expectations. What started as a typical Tuesday morning, spent steaming a silk blouse worth more than her weekly paycheck, took a shocking turn when her mother called with unsettling news. Maya Patel wasn't your typical retail worker. For years, she had been quietly building her own life in the world of fashion, known for her uncanny ability to connect with people and offer insights that made them feel understood. When she was told that she was uninvited from her sister Emma's extravagant birthday party because her situation didn't fit the family's image, she had no idea that this rejection would spark a chain of events that would alter her future. Maya, in a quiet rebellion, decided to stop seeking validation and began embracing her true self. What followed was a dramatic transformation that led her from retail work to becoming a consultant in corporate crisis communications. Her unique perspective, rooted in empathy and honesty, made her invaluable to the business world, ultimately shifting the dynamic in her family's eyes. What began as the sting of exclusion would become the realization of her own worth. The Patel family would never be the same after Maya's quiet defiance reshaped her future and their understanding of success. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They say silence speaks louder than words, but nothing cuts deeper than being deliberately ignored, especially when you've poured your whole self into something only to watch it dissolve into background noise. My name is Maya Patel. I'm 28 years old, working retail at a high-end boutique in Soho. And today I learned exactly where I stand in my family's hierarchy. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was steaming wrinkles out of a silk blouse that cost more than my weekly paycheck. Emma's birthday party this weekend. Maya Lena's voice floated through the phone, tinged with that particular strain. Mothers get when they're about to deliver bad news, disguised as practical advice. Your father and I had already been talking. I set down the steamer knowing something was coming, something that would make my chest tight and my hands shake the way they always did when my family decided to remind me of my place. We think it might be better if you don't come. This time, Maya, she continued, each word careful, measured like she was defusing a bomb. The guest list is quite impressive this year. David's colleagues from the firm, some very important people, and well, your father is concerned about. She paused, and in that pause I could hear everything she wasn't saying. I could hear years of quiet disappointment, years of wishing I was more like Emma. Years of explaining away my existence to people who mattered, concerned about what Maya asked. Though I already knew the answer. Your situation, Maya, she said. Finally, your job. I mean, we're so proud of you for working hard. But these people, they might not understand. They might ask questions about what you do and what would be so terrible about that. I interrupted, feeling something hot rise in my throat. They might learn that your daughter works for a living, that she shows up every day and helps people find beautiful things that she's actually good at. Something. Maya, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your father just thinks it would be more comfortable for everyone if you sat this one out. Maybe next year when things are different. When what things are different, Maya? When I suddenly become someone else. When I magically transform. Emma, when I stop being an embarrassment. She sighed deeply, and I could picture her rubbing her temples, the way she always did when family conversations got complicated. You're not an embarrassment, Maya. You're just different, and sometimes different doesn't fit. The line went quiet, except for the sound of New York City humming outside the boutique window, cars honking, people talking, life continuing, while mine seemed to pause mid-breath. So that's it, I said. Finally, no discussion, no consideration, just a unilateral decision that I'm not good enough to be seen with my own family. It's not about being it's about being appropriate. Your father has worked very hard to build relationships with these people, and Emma's marriage to David has opened doors. We can't afford to what, Maya, to have them see that one of your daughters works retail, that she doesn't wear designer clothes, drive expensive cars, that she's normal. Normal isn't the problem, Maya. It's that you're not settling. It's that you seem content with so little when you could be doing so much more. And there it was, the thing that had been hanging between us for years, unspoken, but always present, the belief that my contentment was somehow a character flaw, that finding meaning in small things was a failure, that being happy without their definition of success was inadequate. I hung up without saying goodbye, because what was left to say? I stood there in the boutique, surrounded by clothes that cost more than most people make in months, feeling smaller than I'd felt in years. The silk blouse hung limp on its hanger, suddenly looking less elegant and more like evidence of everything. I wasn't. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Customers came and went, asking for sizes and colors and my opinion on what looked best. I smiled and helped and recommended, feeling like I was performing normalcy, while something fundamental shifted inside me that evening. I sat in my studio apartment, eating takeout Chinese, and staring at my phone. Emma had posted pictures from her birthday dinner preparation: beautiful flowers, expensive wine. David, looking handsome in his perfectly tailored suit. The caption read, "Getting ready for the most amazing celebration with the most amazing people." I wasn't tagged. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even a shadow in the background of their perfect life. Aiden called around 9, his voice warm and familiar, cutting through the static in my head. "How was your day?" he asked. And something in his tone told me he already knew. Something was wrong. "My family uninvited me from Emma's party," I said without preamble. "They think I'm too embarrassing to be seen with their important friends." Stretched between us, and then Aiden's voice came back sharper than usual. "Maya, that's not okay. That's actually really messed up." "I know," I said. "But it's not surprising, is it? I've been the afterthought for so long. I should have seen this coming." "No, Maya, you shouldn't have seen it coming, because normal families don't do this. Normal families don't exclude people. They're supposed to love. But we're not a normal family, Aiden. We're a family where love comes with conditions, where acceptance requires meeting certain standards, and apparently I don't meet them." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, staring out my window at the city lights, each one representing someone living their own complicated life, someone probably dealing with their own family drama, their own moments of feeling unseen. "You could go anyway," he suggested. "Show up and make them deal with the awkwardness they created." "But what would that prove? That I'm willing to force myself into spaces where I'm not wanted, that I'm so desperate for their approval, I'll endure humiliation just to be in the same room. Or it could prove that you refuse to be erased, that you're part of this family whether they like it or not." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm tired. Aiden, I'm tired of fighting for scraps of recognition, tired of proving my worth to people who should love me unconditionally, tired of feeling like I have to apologize for being myself." "Then don't fight," he said simply. "Don't go. Don't apologize, don't explain, just live your life, and let them figure out what they're missing." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, feeling something settle inside me, something that felt like resolve mixed with grief. I wasn't going to Emma's party, not because they didn't want me there, but because I was finally ready to stop wanting to be there. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself, and it felt both terrifying and liberating, like stepping off a cliff and discovering I could fly. The days after the call moved differently, like time itself had shifted gears, giving me space to breathe and think and feel things I'd been pushing down for years. I went to work each morning, helping customers find perfect outfits for events I'd never be invited to, and somehow that irony felt less bitter than usual. Friday morning brought another call from Emma herself, this time her voice bright and performative in that way she'd perfected since marrying David. "Maya, I heard you're not coming tomorrow night." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I said simply, "No, I'm not." "Mom said you were upset about something," she continued, as if my absence was a minor inconvenience, rather than a rejection. "Are you sure you can't make it?" "Won't be the same without you." "There won't be the same." "How?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Since when does my presence or absence affect anything about your life? That's not fair." "Maya, we're sisters, are we?" I said, the words surprising me with their sharpness, because sisters usually include each other in important moments. Sisters don't uninvite each other from family celebrations. Emma's silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then, she said in a voice smaller than usual, I didn't uninvite you, that was Dad's decision, and you just went along with it, Maya. It's complicated. There are business considerations, people David needs to impress, so I'm bad for business now. You're being dramatic. Am I, or am I finally being honest about what this family actually thinks of me? Look, Emma said, her voice hardening back into its familiar dismissive tone. If you want to sulk and miss out on a beautiful evening, that's your choice, but don't blame us for moving forward without you. There it was, the assumption that I was sulking, that my hurt was childish, that their exclusion was somehow my fault for taking it personally. I hope you have a wonderful time, Emma, I said, and meant it. Your party is everything you want it to be, and I hope Dad's business contacts are suitably impressed, Maya. Wait, but I'd already hung up because there was nothing left to say, nothing that would bridge the gap between us, nothing that would make her understand that this wasn't about missing a party, was about finally seeing clearly how expendable I'd always been. Saturday came gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matches internal storms. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment, not because it needed it, but because I needed the motion, the sense of control that came from making small spaces perfect. Then I called Aiden. What are you doing tonight, he asked. When he picked up, staying home, avoiding family drama, eating ice cream directly from the container. Good, he said. Want company always. He showed up at 7 with Thai food and a bottle of wine, and the kind of easy presence that reminded me why friendship mattered more than blood. Sometimes we ate on my couch watching terrible reality TV, and not talking about the party happening across town around 10. Aiden muted the television, and looked at me seriously. How are you really doing with all this? Better than I expected. I admitted it hurts, but it also feels like clarity, like finally admitting something I've known for years, which is that I've been trying to fit into a space that was never designed for me, that I've been apologizing for being myself instead of finding people who actually appreciate who I am. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made me feel less alone. You know what I realized tonight? What you're the most authentic person I know. You don't pretend to be anything other than exactly who you are, and that's actually pretty rare. Is it though? Because sometimes it feels like everyone else figured out secret about how to be the right kind of person, and I missed that class. There is no right kind of person, Maya. There are just people who are honest about who they are, and people who aren't. Your family is so busy performing success, they've forgotten what actually matters. What actually matters, though I thought I might know the answer: being kind, being real, showing up for people who matter, treating work as something you do, not something you are, finding joy in small things instead of always reaching for bigger things. You sound like a greeting card, I teased, but his words settled some inside me. Maybe, but greeting cards exist because people need to hear these things, even if they sound simple. We sat quiet for a while, watching the city lights through my window, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace, not the fragile kind that depended on other people's approval, but the steady kind that came from knowing I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone buzzed with notifications, Emma's party social media updates, showing beautiful people in beautiful clothes, having beautiful conversations. I looked at a few, then put the phone face down on the coffee table. Not interested, Aiden asked. Not anymore, I said, and realized I meant it completely for the first time in my life, genuinely. Didn't want to be anywhere other than where I was. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling different, lighter, like I'd put down something heavy I'd been carrying without realizing it. The apartment felt bigger, the coffee tasted better, even the gray weather seemed less oppressive. I spent the day reading, organizing photos, calling my grandmother, who always asked about my work with genuine interest, and never compared me to Emma. It was a quiet day, the kind I used to think was boring, but now recognized as exactly what I needed. Monday brought me back to the boutique where Maria, my manager, greeted me with her usual warmth. How was your weekend? Maya, did you do anything special? I spent it exactly how I wanted to, I said, And she smiled because that's the kind of answer that makes sense when you're not performing for anyone. The morning passed peacefully. Customers came and went, interaction, feeling more genuine than usual because I wasn't distracted by trying to be someone else. I was just Maya, helping people find things that made them feel good about themselves. Then around noon, my phone rang. David's name on the screen, and something cold settled in my stomach because David never called me. We barely spoke at family gatherings, beyond polite small talk. Maya, he said. When I answered, his voice tense in a way I'd never heard. Thank God. You picked up. I need your help. What's wrong? I asked, though part of me wondered why he was calling me instead of Emma, or my parents or any of the important people. From Saturday night's party, there's been a situation at the company, he continued, a major PR crisis, and I need someone smart. Someone I can trust, someone who can think clearly under pressure. David, I work retail. I don't know anything about corporate crisis management, but you know. Maya, you understand how to make people feel comfortable, how to handle difficult situations. I've watched you at family gatherings. You're the one who smooths over awkward moments, who makes everyone feel included. Even when, what even when, they don't deserve it. He finished quietly. I know this is strange, but I'm desperate here, and for some reason you're the first person I thought of calling. The irony wasn't lost on me. 24 hours after being told I wasn't appropriate for polite company, I was being asked to help save someone's business. But something in David's voice made me pause, something vulnerable and real, that I'd never heard before. What kind of crisis? I asked. The kind that could destroy everything we've built. He said, the kind that requires someone who actually cares about doing the right thing. Not just protecting profits. And you think that's me? I think you're the most genuine person in this family. Maya, and right now, genuine is exactly what we need. I looked around the boutique at the beautiful clothes and the quiet Tuesday afternoon at the life I'd built. That wasn't glamorous, but was mine then. I thought about the party I hadn't attended, and the family who'd decided I wasn't worth including. Okay, I said, surprising myself. What do you need me to do? The crisis meeting was set for 2 p.m. at David's company headquarters, a gleaming tower in Midtown that I'd walked past countless times, without ever imagining I'd be inside. I left the boutique early, telling Maria I had a family emergency, which wasn't exactly untrue, though the family dynamics were more complicated than she probably imagined. Standing in the lobby, waiting for the elevator, I felt small among the marble and glass, and people in expensive suits, all moving with the kind of purpose that comes from believing your work matters. To the world, the elevator ride to the 32nd floor gave me just enough time to wonder what I'd gotten myself in. David met me at the elevator doors, his usual polished confidence, replaced by something rawer, more desperate. He looked like a man who'd been up all night, staring at problems without solutions. Maya, thank you for coming, he said, guiding me toward a conference room where several other people sat around a long table, looking various degrees of panicked. I know this is unusual, but he stopped walking and turned to face me, directly, his eyes searing a way I'd never seen before. What happened here isn't just about business, Maya, it's about people getting hurt, and I need someone who actually gives a damn about that, not someone who just wants to calculate the minimal response to protect our stock price. The conference room buzzed with tense energy. A woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and tired edges introduced herself as Jennifer, the head of communications. A younger man named Marcus represented legal and 2 other executives, whose names blurred together in my nervousness. David gestured for me to sit, then began explaining the situation. Yesterday morning, he said, we discovered that one of our manufacturing partners has been violating labor standards at their facility. Overseas workers being paid below minimum wage, unsafe conditions. The whole thing is about to break in the news cycle, and we need to figure out how to respond. My first instinct was to ask why they hadn't known about this sooner, but something in the room's energy told me This wasn't the time for blame. It was the time for solutions. What kind of response are you considering? I asked. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of times. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jennifer leaned forward. We have a standard crisis management protocol: limit liability, distance ourselves from the partner, minimize long-term damage to the brand. That sounds reasonable. I said. Something about it felt hollow. It would be reasonable, David said, if we were just talking about protecting profits, but there are actual people being hurt here, and I can't sleep at night, knowing we profited from that, even indirectly. Marcus, the lawyer, shifted uncomfortably. David, we've discussed this. The legal exposure. If we admit any responsibility, I'm not talking about legal responsibility, I'm talking about moral responsibility. David shot back, then looked at me. Maya, what do you think? Me, I said, startled by being asked for an opinion in a room full of people with advanced degrees and years of corporate experience. Yes, you, David said. You work with people every day, you understand what matters to them. What would you want to hear from a company in our position? I thought about my customers at the boutique, how they trusted me to help them find things that made them feel good about themselves, how that trust was built through honesty and genuine care. I'd want to know that you actually cared. I said slowly that this wasn't just about damage control but about making sure it never happened again. Jennifer nodded impatiently. We can craft messaging around commitment to improvement. No, I said, more firmly than I'd intended. That's exactly what people don't want to hear. More corporate speak. That sounds like you're reading from a script. David leaned forward. What would sound genuine to you? Admitting you made a mistake, I said, feeling more confident as I spoke, taking real responsibility just for what happened, but for not preventing it in the first place, and then explaining specifically what you're going to do differently. Not vague promises but actual concrete steps. The room fell quiet and I wondered if I'd overstepped, but David was nodding slowly. What else? He asked. Make it personal, I continued, surprised by my own clarity. Show that real people inside this company are upset about this, that you're not just worried about your reputation but genuinely sorry that people were hurt. Jennifer frowned. That opens us to significant liability. Maybe, I said, but it also opens you actually solving the problem instead of just managing it. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Maya, I appreciate the idealism, but there are real legal and financial considerations here. I understand that, I said, but there are also real human considerations. And maybe if companies spent more time thinking about those, they wouldn't end up in situations like this. David smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. That's exactly why I called you. He said to the room, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is the perspective we need. Jennifer still looked skeptical. David, with all due respect, Maya doesn't have experience in crisis management. You're right, I said before David could respond. Don't have experience managing crises, but I have experience being on the receiving end of corporate responses that feel fake and manipulative, and I can tell you they don't work. What would work? Jennifer asked. And something in her tone suggested she was genuinely curious despite her skepticism. Honesty, I said simply. People can usually tell when you're being real with them, and when you're trying to spin them. They want to know that you see them as people, not just consumers or potential lawsuits. David stood up suddenly, pacing to the window, overlooking the city. This is what we're going to do. He said, we're going to take full responsibility. We're going to implement immediate changes at all our partner facilities, and we're going to be completely transparent about the process. Jennifer and Marcus exchanged worried glances, but David continued, and Maya is going to help us craft the messaging because she understands something. The rest of us have forgotten how to talk to people like they're actually people. Wait, I said, panic rising in my chest. I don't know how to write corporate communications. You don't need to know how to write corporate communications, David said. You need to tell the truth in a way that people will believe, and that's exactly what you've been doing. The next few hours passed in a blur of drafts and revisions. phone calls with board members and heated discussions about legal liability. But through it all, David kept coming back to me, asking what felt genuine, asking what would matter to real people. By 6 p.m., we had a statement that felt different from anything I'd ever heard from a corporation. It admitted fault without hedging. It promised specific actions with timelines. It treated the affected workers as people rather than abstract concepts. As the finally cleared, Jennifer approached me. Maya, I have to admit I was skeptical when David brought you in. But this statement, it feels different. Different how? I asked like it was written by someone who actually cares about the outcome. Not just the optics. Walking home through the city that evening, something I hadn't experienced before, the sense that my perspective mattered, that my voice had value beyond my family's narrow definition of success. David had called me not because of my resume or my connections, but because of who I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. How did the mysterious family emergency go? Better than expected, I replied. It turns out I might be good at things I never thought I was good at. Like what? Like believing that people deserve honesty, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated. He texted back, I'm proud of you, Maya. I smiled, walking past the boutique where I'd worked that morning, feeling like the person who'd steamed silk blouses was someone I used to be. The crisis wasn't over yet, but something fundamental had shifted in how I saw myself, and maybe that was the most important crisis to solve. The statement went live at 8 a.m. Wednesday morning, and by 9 my phone was ringing with calls from reporters wanting follow-up interviews. David texted asking if I could come in early to help field questions, and for the first time in my life someone was asking for my help, not my silence. The boutique felt different that morning, small somehow, as if spending a day in corporate towers had recalibrated my sense of space. Maria noticed immediately. You look different today, Maya, she said, studying my face more focused. I feel different, I admitted. I spent yesterday helping solve a crisis at my brother-in-law's company, and it turns out I might actually be good at that kind of thing. Crisis management. Maria raised an eyebrow. Impressive. What kind of crisis? The kind where people get hurt, and companies have to decide whether they care more about profits or people. And which did you choose? People, I said without hesitation, and Maria smiled, the kind of smile that said she wasn't surprised. By 10 a.m. the story was everywhere. News websites, social media, business journals. David's company, trending for all the right reasons. For the first time in my memory, I was part of something that felt important, not just personally, but globally. The phone calls kept coming throughout the morning, reporters wanting to understand the company's unusual approach to crisis management, analysts praising the transparency, board members calling David to express surprise at the positive response. Around noon, David called Maya. We need you here, full-time. What do you mean? I mean, we're getting calls from their companies wanting to know how we handled this. We're getting inquiries from business schools wanting to study our approach. There's talk of turning this into a consulting model, and I need someone who understands the human element. David, I don't have the background for that. You have some better than background, Maya. You have instincts and you have integrity. And those are things you can't teach. But I work retail. Not anymore, he said. And something in his voice was different, less desperate, more determined. You're working crisis communications now. If you want to. The offer hung in the air, like something I could reach for, or let drift away. Part of me wanted to retreat back to the safety of the boutique, where expectations were clear and manageable, but a larger part recognized this as the moment. Everything could change. What would it involve? I asked. Helping companies tell the truth, David said. When they've made mistakes, helping them figure out how to do better, not just how to look better. That afternoon, I found myself back in the conference room, but this time, as a member of the team, not a confused outsider. Jennifer, who'd been skeptical the day before, now sought my opinion on follow-up messaging. Marcus, the lawyer, still looked uncomfortable with our approach, but even he admitted the positive response was unprecedented. Maya, Jennifer said, during our 3 p.m. meeting. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about people being able to tell when companies are being fake. Yes, I think you're right, and I think that's why this is working. People aren't used to hearing actual accountability from corporations. They're used to hearing deflection and spin. Exactly, I said, feeling more confident in my role. The more we try to sound corporate, the less people trust us. Do we maintain this approach? David asked. As we scale up, we remember that every crisis involves real people, I said, and we make sure those people's experiences are centered in every decision we make, not as an afterthought, but as the starting point. The conversation continued for another hour, logistics and timelines and business development. But I found myself thinking about my family, about how they'd react to learning that their retail working daughter was suddenly consulting for major corporations around 5 p.m. As the meeting wrapped up, Jennifer pulled me aside. Maya, can I ask you something personal? Sure. What made you so good at this? You don't have the usual background, but you understood exactly what was missing from our typical approach. I thought about it for a moment, then said, I think it's because I've spent my whole life being dismissed by people who thought they knew better than me. So I recognize when other people are being dismissed too. That makes sense, she said, nodding, then smiled. You know, David was right to call you. We needed someone who remembered that business is actually about people walking home that evening. I felt the strangest sensation, like I was inhabiting my own life differently. The same streets looked familiar, but my place in them had shifted. I wasn't just Maya who worked retail anymore. I was Maya who helped solve problems, Maya whose voice mattered, Maya who might actually be good at something important. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Maya, heard you helped David with some work thing yesterday. Just a small crisis, I replied, not wanting to get into details. Well, good for you, she wrote, though something in the phrasing felt patronizing, like she was praising a child for helping with housework. Aiden called as I was heating up leftover takeout. How was day 2 of your corporate adventure? Transformative, I said. Honestly, David offered me a full-time position. Maya, that's incredible. Are you going to take it? I think so, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I think I'm good at this. Aiden, of course you are, said warmly. You've always been good at seeing what people need and helping them feel understood. But this is different. This is helping companies worth millions of dollars make decisions that affect thousands of people, and you don't think you're capable of that. I'm starting to think maybe I am, admitted, and for the first time that felt like a reasonable thing to believe. The evening news featured a segment about David's company and their unprecedented approach to crisis management. The reporter called it a new model for corporate responsibility and mentioned that the strategy had developed with help from a consultant who specialized in authentic communication. Sitting on my couch, watching myself described as a consultant who specialized in anything felt surreal. 6 months ago, my family had uninvited me from a birthday party because my retail job was embarrassing. Now, being credited with revolutionizing how companies handle crises, my phone rang, Emma's name on the screen. Maya, she said, when I answered her voice. Strange, did you see the news? Which news? About David's company. They mentioned a consultant who helped with their crisis response. Was that you? Yeah, simply, but you work at a boutique. Not anymore. What do you mean, not anymore? I mean, David offered me a position helping companies handle crisis communications, and I'm going to take it. Emma was quiet for so long. I thought the call might have dropped. Then she said in a voice smaller than usual, Didn't you tell me you were interested in that kind of work because you never asked? I said without anger, just truth, because none of you ever asked what I might be interested in, beyond whether it met your standards for success. That's not fair, Maya, isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked me about my goals or my interests or what I might want to do with my life? But crisis communications. Maya, that's so different from retail. People are people. Emma, whether they're buying clothes or dealing with corporate disasters, they want to be treated with respect and honesty. I don't understand how even know how to do that kind of work. Apparently I've been doing it my whole life. I just never had the right context to show it. The call ended awkwardly with Emma saying she had to go, but her voice carried something I'd never heard before. Uncertainty, like maybe she didn't understand me as well as she'd always assumed. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how quickly everything had changed, how the same person who'd been too embarrassing for a birthday party was suddenly valuable enough to reshape corporate communications. The shift felt both sudden and inevitable. I'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Every difficult customer I'd helped, every family gathering where I'd smoothed over tensions, every time I'd chosen honesty over convenience, had been practice for something bigger. Tomorrow I would give notice at the boutique and start building something new, something that honored both who I'd always been and who I was becoming. The girl who wasn't good enough for her family's important friends was becoming someone who helped important companies remember how to be human, and for the first time in my life, that felt like exactly the right transformation. News travels fast in families, especially when that news threatens the carefully constructed narrative they've built about who matters and who doesn't. By Thursday morning, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. Suddenly everyone wanted to know about my new consulting work, as if my success was somehow their business. The first call came from my mother, her voice bright with forced enthusiasm. "Maya, Beta, I heard such wonderful news about your new job with David's company. Why didn't you tell us you were interested in that field? Because you never asked, I said, tired of having the same conversation over and over. Because when I tried to talk about wanting to do meaningful work, you told me I should be more like Emma. That's not fair. Maya, we've always supported your choices. Have you?" I asked, genuinely curious because I remember being uninvited from Emma's party just last week because my retail job was too embarrassing for your social circle. That was different. Your father was just concerned about what exactly? About people knowing that one of your daughters works for a living. Maya, please don't twist this. We're proud of you. We've always been proud. Then, why does it feel like you're only proud now that my work suddenly matters to David? The conversation ended with my mother saying she just wanted what was best for me, which translated to she wanted what looked best for them. The pattern continued throughout the day, and cousins reaching out with congratulations. That felt more like curiosity than genuine happiness. Friday brought a family dinner invitation, the first one I'd received in months. Lena calling to say they wanted to celebrate my new position, which would have been touching if it hadn't felt so transparently opportunistic. "We're having dinner Sunday night," she said. "David and Emma will be there, and we thought it would be nice to hear about your new work." "You mean you want to understand how this happened, so you can figure out how to take credit for it?" Maya, that's cynical, is it? Or is it realistic? Maya, because 2 weeks ago I wasn't appropriate for Emma's birthday party, and now suddenly I'm worthy of a celebration. Dinner, can't we just be happy for you? You can be happy for me, but let's be honest about why you're suddenly interested in my life. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like stepping into a carefully staged performance. Everyone dressed slightly better than usual, my father wearing his good shirt, my mother having made my favorite dessert, Emma and David arriving with flowers as if this was a genuine celebration, rather than damage control. The conversations safely enough. General questions about my new role, polite interest in the company's positive response, but I could feel the undercurrent of confusion and resentment, especially from Emma, who kept glancing at David as if trying to understand how her retail working sister had suddenly become valuable to her successful husband. David seemed genuinely pleased with the attention the story was getting, praising my instincts and natural ability, while my parents nodded along as if they'd always recognized my potential. "Maya has such a gift for understanding people," Sundar said pompously, as if he'd been mentioning my communication skills for years rather than dismissing them. Emma finally spoke up about halfway through dinner. "So Maya, this consulting thing, is it something you've been planning for a while?" "No," I said honestly. "It just happened. David needed help, and I was available." "But how did you know what to do?" Emma pressed, her voice carrying a sigh. "I hadn't heard before. I didn't know, I just listened to what felt right." Emma looked skeptical. That seems like a pretty big leap from folding clothes to managing corporate crises. People are people, Emma, whether they're buying dresses or dealing with business problems, they want to be heard and treated with respect. But surely there's more to it than that. David jumped in. Maya's insight into authentic communication was exactly what we needed. She understood instinctively how to rebuild trust. Trust, I said, looking directly at Emma, is something you earn by being honest about your mistakes and showing people you're committed to doing better, not by pretending problems don't exist or hiding behind corporate speak. The table fell quiet and I realized my words carried weight beyond business advice. They were about family dynamics, about years of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Lena tried to lighten the mood. Who wants more dessert after dinner? David pulled me aside while Emma helped clear dishes. Maya, I hope you know how grateful I am for your help, and not just professionally. What do you mean? You've helped me remember what actually matters in business. Treating people like people, instead of just managing perceptions that should have always mattered. David, you're right, he said, and I think that's why this worked so well. You never forgot that Emma appeared beside us. What are you two talking about? David was just saying how the authentic approach seemed to resonate with people. I said, keeping my tone neutral. Authentic approach, Emma repeated, as if testing the words. It sounds like you're saying, most business communication isn't authentic. Most of it isn't. I said simply, most of it is designed to protect companies rather than actually address problems. But that's just smart business, Emma said, her voice defensive. You have to protect your interests. You can protect your interests and still tell the truth. They're not mutually exclusive. Emma's eyes narrowed. Maya, you're talking like you've been doing this for years, but a week ago, you were working retail, and a week ago you thought retail work made me unsuitable for polite company. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said, Emma. And now that my work suddenly has value in your world, you want to understand how it happened. The tension stretched between us until David cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should head home, Emma. Driving back to my apartment that night, I felt the familiar exhaustion that came from family gatherings, but this time it was mixed with something else. Clarity about how conditional the acceptance had always been. Aiden called as I was getting ready for bed. How was the celebration dinner? Exactly what you'd expect, I said. They're thrilled that I'm suddenly worth celebrating. Meaning they still don't understand that the person who helped solve David's crisis is the same person they've been dismissing for years. They think something magical happened to transform me, instead of recognizing that maybe they just weren't paying attention. Do you think they'll ever get it? Honestly, no, I said, and I'm starting to think that's okay. I don't need them to understand. I just need them to stop acting like my worth is dependent on their approval. That sounds healthy, Aiden said. Though I detected concern in his voice, it feels healthy too. Which is weird because I thought letting go of their validation would feel like losing something. But instead, it feels like finding something myself, I said, without them constantly telling me who I should be. I'm finally figuring out who I actually am. Monday morning brought new opportunities. Companies reaching out after hearing about our crisis management approach, journalists wanting interviews about the human-centered communication model, and David asking me to help develop training materials for other executives. Sitting in the conference room that had become familiar, I realized something profound had shifted, not just in my career but in how I moved through the world. I no longer felt like I was apologizing for taking up space, explaining why my perspective mattered. Jennifer, who'd become an ally over the past week, mentioned something that stuck with me. Maya, you know what I admire about your approach? What you never seem to doubt that honesty is the right strategy, even when it's harder, because it is the right strategy, said. And once you commit to that, everything else becomes clearer. She nodded, thoughtfully. I think that's what your family is struggling with. They're used to managing impressions, and you're just being yourself. Exactly. and apparently being myself is more powerful than I ever realized. The week ended with David offering me a permanent position as Director of Authentic Communications, a title that would have seemed impossible a month ago when I was steaming silk blouses and feeling invisible. Accepting felt like stepping fully into a life I'd been building without realizing it, a life where my natural instincts were valuable, where my perspective mattered, where I didn't have to apologize for caring about people that evening. I called my grandmother, the one family member who'd always asked about my work with genuine interest. "Nani," I said. When she picked up, "I have news." "Tell me." Beta, her voice warm with curiosity. "I'm not working at the boutique anymore. I'm helping companies learn how to communicate honestly when they've made mistakes." "That sounds like important work," she said. Without surprise, "You've always been good at helping people understand each other." "Have I?" "Yes, Maya. Even as a little girl, you could see when someone was hurting, and you knew how to make them feel better." "That's a gift." "I never thought of it as a gift," I said, feeling tears prick my eyes. "Because you've been surrounded by people who don't value that kind of intelligence," she said, gently. "But intelligence comes in many forms, and yours has always been about understanding hearts." Sitting in my apartment after that call, I felt something settle inside me, like pieces of a puzzle, finally clicking into place. My family's recent attention felt hollow because it was based on external validation, but my grandmother's word rang true because they recognized something that had always been there. I was still Maya, the same person who'd been too embarrassing for birthday parties, but now I was Maya, who helped corporations remember their humanity, and somehow that felt like the most natural progression in the world. Who'd always been too much or not enough, was finally discovering she'd been exactly right all along. The monthly family gathering happened by accident. Really, Emma calling to say she was dropping by Mom and Dad's place, and David suggesting we all meet there since we'd been meaning to catch up. It felt casual enough that I agreed, though something in Emma's voice suggested this wasn't as spontaneous as she was pretending. Sunday afternoon found us all in my parents' living room, the same space where countless conversations about my inadequacies had taken place, though now the energy felt different, charged with something I couldn't quite identify. David seemed excited about sharing news from work, talking about how the crisis management approach had attracted attention from business schools and other companies. "Maya's model is being studied as a case example," he said, looking at me with genuine admiration. "Harvard Business Review wants to do a feature story." "That's wonderful," Beta Sundar said, though his pride felt performative, like he was trying on an emotion that didn't quite fit. Emma had been unusually quiet but finally spoke up. "It's funny," she said, her voice careful. "How things change, isn't Maya?" "What do you mean?" I asked, though I suspected where this was heading. "I mean, a month ago you were working retail and now you're apparently some kind of corporate consultant. It's quite a transformation." "Not really a transformation," I said, evenly, "more like recognition of something that was always there." Emma's laugh had an edge to it. "Come on, Maya. You can't seriously say you saw this coming." "I didn't see this specific opportunity coming, but I always knew I was good at understanding people and helping them communicate better. But understanding people in a boutique is very different from understanding corporate crisis management." Emma pressed, and something in her tone made David shift uncomfortably. "Actually, it's not that different," I said. "People are people, whether they're upset about a wrong dress size or a company making mistakes that hurt workers. The principles are the same. To what they're really saying, validate their feelings and figure out how to make things right." David nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what I tried to explain to the board. Maya has an intuitive understanding of authentic communication that most consultants spend years trying to develop." "Most consultants have relevant education and experience," Emma said pointedly, "and most consultants produce the same generic responses that make people feel unheard." I countered, "Which is why companies keep having the same problems over and over." Sundar cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Maya, we're all proud of your success, Beta. We just want to understand how this happened, what happened, how you went from retail work to corporate consulting. It's quite unusual." "What's unusual about it?" "People skills are transferable, Dad. Whether you're helping someone find the right outfit or helping a company find the right words, The core ability is the same, but surely there's more to it than that, Lena said, her voice anxious. Surely you had some background, some training. My background is 28 years of being dismissed and overlooked and learning to see when other people are being dismissed and overlooked, too. The room fell silent and I realized I'd said something that cut deeper than intended, but I didn't want to take it back because it was true. Maya, Emma said, carefully. What do you mean by that? I mean, I've spent my entire life watching this family prioritize appearances over authenticity, watching you all dismiss work that didn't meet your narrow definition of success, and that experience taught me to recognize when institutions do the same thing to people. That's not fair, Maya, Sundar said, his voice sharp. We've always supported you, have you, Dad? Last month you uninvited me from Emma's birthday party because my retail job was too embarrassing for your social circle. That was about appropriateness, not embarrassment. What's the difference exactly? David looked increasingly uncomfortable. Maya, maybe we should know. David, I said firmly. This is important, because my family spent years telling me my work didn't matter, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I should be more like Emma. And now that my skills have value in your world, suddenly everyone wants to understand how this happened. Emma's face flushed. Maya, you're being dramatic. Am I? Because from where I sit, it looks like you're all trying to figure out how to take credit for something you've spent years telling me wasn't worth doing. That's not true, Beta Lena said, tears forming in her eyes. We've always loved you. Loving me and respecting me are different things, Maya. You can love someone while constantly telling them they're not enough. I never said you weren't enough, Sundar protested. You didn't have to say it. Dad, it was in every conversation about my job, every comparison to Emma, a suggestion that I should want more than what made me happy. David finally spoke up. Maya, I had no idea you felt this way about your family's support. That's because you've been part of the problem, David, I said, turning to face him. You've spent years treating me like Emma's less successful sister. Polite conversation at family gatherings, while clearly thinking I was wasting my potential. But I called you for help, David said, defensively. I recognized your abilities. You recognized my abilities when you were desperate, and had nowhere else to turn. But before that, you saw me exactly the way the rest of them did, as the family member who wasn't living up to expectations. Emma stood up, suddenly. Maya, this is enough. You're being cruel. Am I, or am I being honest? For the first time, about how this family actually works. What do you mean, how this family works? I mean, we pretend everything is fine while constantly ranking each other's worth based on external achievements. I mean, we talk about love and support, while actively discouraging anything that doesn't fit our narrow definition of success. You chose to work retail, Maya, Emma said, her voice rising. Nobody forced you into that job, right? I chose it. Because I enjoyed it. Because I was good at it. Because it made me feel useful. But instead of supporting that choice, you all spent years making me feel ashamed of it. We never meant to make you feel ashamed, Lena said, quietly. But you did, Maya, and the proof is that you're all surprised to discover I have valuable skills, as if the ability to understand and help people could only matter in certain context. Sundar looked defeated. Maya, what do you want from us? I want you to stop acting like my success is something that happened to me instead of something I earned. I want you to acknowledge that the person who helped save David's company is the same person you've been dismissing for years. And then what? Emma asked, her voice cold. And then, maybe we can have honest relationships, instead of performative ones. David cleared his throat again. Maya, I hope you know how sorry that you felt unsupported. I genuinely had no idea. I believe you, David, but that's part of the problem. None of you had any idea. Because you never asked, you never looked beyond your assumptions about what my life meant. The conversation limped along for another hour, everyone trying to find their footing in this new dynamic, where I was no longer willing to accept dismissal disguised as concern. By the time we said goodbye, the air felt different, clearer, but also more fragile. Driving home, I felt exhausted but also relieved, like I'd finally said things that had been building inside me for years. The family dinner had forced a reckoning that was probably overdue. Aiden called as I was heating up leftover soup. How was the family gathering? Brutal but necessary. I said honestly. I finally told them how their treatment of me has felt all these years. How did they react? About how you'd expect. Confusion, defensiveness, some tears, but also maybe the beginning of understanding. That sounds emotionally exhausting. It was, but also liberating. You know that feeling when you finally say something you've been afraid to say, and the sky doesn't fall. Yeah, though sometimes the sky does fall. A little maybe, but if the sky that falls is built on pretending everything is fine, when it's not, then maybe that's not such a bad thing. Wise words, Aiden said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. How are you feeling about it all? Different, I said. Like I've finally stopped apologizing for being myself. Sounds like progress to me. It feels like progress too. Scary. Progress, but progress nonetheless. Monday morning brought me back to the office, where Jennifer greeted me with news that 3 more companies had reached out about crisis communication consulting. Maya, she said, you've started something here. Have I? Absolutely. And not just the business model, the whole approach to corporate responsibility. David told me about the conversation with your family yesterday. He did. He's concerned about you, worried that the family tension might affect your work here. I appreciate his concern, but honestly, this job has helped me understand my own value in a way that makes family drama feel less important. That's probably healthy, Jennifer said thoughtfully. Families can be complicated, especially when your success challenges their assumptions about who you're supposed to be. Exactly. And I'm finally at a point where I'm more interested in building something meaningful than in managing other people's comfort with my choices. The week flew by with new projects, new clients, new opportunities to help companies find their authentic voice. It felt like the work I'd been preparing for my whole life without knowing. That Friday evening found me walking through the city feeling more grounded than I had in years. The conversation with my family had been difficult, but necessary, forcing everyone to acknowledge truths that had been simmering below the surface for too long. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. I've been thinking about Sunday. Me too, I replied. I owe you an apology, she wrote. I didn't realize how dismissive we've been of your choices. That means a lot, Emma. Thank you. Can we talk soon? Really, talk, not just family dinner conversation. Yes, I wrote back. I'd like that. The text exchange felt like a small opening, a possibility that honest relationships might actually be possible with time and effort. Sitting in my apartment that evening, I realized something important had shifted. I was no longer the person seeking validation from family members who couldn't see my worth. I was the person who found her worth, independent of their approval, and that made all the difference. The crisis that had brought me into David's company was nearly resolved, but the crisis of understanding my own value that had been building for years was finally finding resolution too. Sometimes the most important transformation happens not when others finally see you, but when you finally see yourself clearly, and stop waiting for permission to be who you've always been. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing communication strategies for a new client, my mother's voice tight with the particular strain that meant family business was about to become complicated. Maya Beta, we need to talk about what. Maya asked, though something in her tone made my stomach clench. About the family, about money, about responsibilities. She said each word, careful and measured. Can you come over tonight after work? I almost said no, almost told her that family conversations had become too emotionally expensive, but something in her voice suggested this was different, more serious than usual. Guilt trips. I'll be there, I said, and spent the rest of the day wondering what crisis required an emergency family meeting. My parents' house felt different when I arrived that evening. Smaller somehow, as if the recent conversations had shrunk the space. Sundar sat at the kitchen table with papers spread in front of him, financial documents from the look of them, and Lena hovered nearby, wringing her hand. Maya Beta, sit down, Sundar said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We have something important to discuss. I sat feeling like I was being called to the principal's office. What's going on? Your father lost his job, Lena said, suddenly, as if the words had been building pressure behind her lips. Company downsized last month and he's been looking for work, but at his age, Maya, why didn't you tell me? Because we didn't want to worry you, Sundar said, his pride evident even in crisis, and because we thought we could handle it ourselves. But you can't, I said gently, looking at the bills spread across the table. No, Beta, we can't. Lena's voice was small, defeated. And we need help, of course, I said immediately. Whatever you need, whatever I can do. Sundar cleared his throat. Maya, you're doing well now with this new consulting work, making good money. Finally, I repeated the word, hanging in the air, like smoke. Better money than retail anyway, he continued. And we thought maybe you could help us with some expenses just temporarily until I find something new. How much do you need? I asked, though I was already calculating my savings, my new salary, the budget I'd been building, enough to cover the mortgage for a few months, maybe some of the utilities, Lena said hopefully, and we could pay you back once your father finds work. Of course, I said again, because what else could I say when your parents are struggling? You help, that's what family does. Sundar looked relieved. Maya, Beta, you've always so responsible. We knew we could count on you. There, it was the thing that made my chest tight, the assumption that I would sacrifice without question, that my resources existed primarily to solve other people's problems. How long has this been going on? I asked. 2 months, Sundar admitted. We've using savings, but that's almost gone. And Emma, I said carefully, does she know about this? Lena and Sundar exchanged glances. Emma has her own expenses, her own life. She can't be expected to help with this kind of thing. What kind of thing exactly? Practical things, Sundar said, dismissively. Emma's life is more complicated. She has social obligations, professional commitments. And I don't. It's different. Maya, Lena said gently. Emma's position requires certain appearances, certain standards. I see, I said, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. So Emma can't help, because she has appearances to maintain, but I can help, because my life is less important. That's not what we meant. Maya, isn't it? Maya, because it sounds like you're saying Emma's success exempts her from family responsibilities. But my success creates them. Maya, Beta, be reasonable. Sundar said, we're not asking for everything, just help with the basics. And it's temporary. How do you know it's temporary? Because I'll find work. What if you don't? What if this lasts longer than a few months? What if helping you means I can't build my own life? Maya, Lena said, shocked. You're talking about your parents. I am talking about my parents. And I'm talking about a pattern where my financial stability becomes everyone else's safety net. You've always been the practical one, Maya, Sundar said, as if that explained everything. The one who makes sensible choices, who doesn't spend money on frivolous things. Frivolous things, like what, Dad? Like expensive clothes, designer handbags, social events, things Emma needs for her lifestyle. So Emma's spending is necessary. But mine is frivolous. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. And it's exactly the problem. I'm tired of being the responsible one, whose resources are always available for everyone else's emergencies. Maya, we're family, Lena said. Tears starting to form. Family helps each other. Family does help each other, Maya. But help goes both ways. It includes emotional support, and respect and recognition, not just financial bailouts. We've always supported you, Maya, have you? Because 2 months ago you uninvited me from Emma's birthday party. And last week you acted surprised that I had valuable skills, and now you want me to solve your financial problems. This is different. Maya, this is survival. And what do you think my life has been all these years? What do you think it's like to constantly have your worth questioned, treated like the backup plan, the one whose dreams matter less because they're not as expensive? Maya, Beta, please. Sundar's voice cracked. You're our daughter, we raised you, we love you. I know you love me, Dad, but you love me like I'm a resource, not like I'm a person with my own goals and needs. That's not true then. Answer this question. When was the last time either of you asked me about my dreams? about what I want for my future, about anything other than how I can help solve problems. The silence stretched long enough to prove my point. I'll help you, I said, finally, because despite everything, you're my parents, and I can't watch you struggle. Thank you, Beta, Lena said, relief flooding her voice, but I said, holding up my hand, there are conditions. Conditions. Sundar frowned, as if the word itself was inappropriate. Yes, conditions. I'll help with essential expenses, mortgage, utilities, basic groceries, nothing beyond that. And this arrangement has a 6-month limit. After that, you need to figure out other solutions. Maya, that seems harsh, does it? Because Emma spending thousands on social events seems normal, but me setting boundaries on financial support seems harsh. That's different. Emma, obligations. We all have obligations, Dad, including the obligation to treat each other with equal respect. What does that mean? It means if you want my financial help, you also have to accept my emotional boundaries. It means no more dismissive comments about my career choices, no more assumptions that time and energy are less valuable than Emma's, no more treating me like the family's emergency fund, Maya, Lena said, uncertainly. We've never meant to make you feel that way, but you have, Maya, and if we're going to move forward, we need to acknowledge that. Sundar looked uncomfortable with conversation's direction. Maya, we're grateful for your help, but these conditions seem excessive. Then, don't accept my help, I said, standing up. Find another solution. Ask Emma for money, or figure out how to make your savings stretch longer. Wait, Maya, sit down, Lena said, quickly. We can accept your conditions. I looked at my parents, sitting at their kitchen table surrounded by bills and broken assumptions, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly, but clarity about who I was and what I was willing to accept. I'll transfer money for this month's mortgage tomorrow, I said, but I want to be clear, this isn't about punishment. It's about finally having honest relationships where everyone's contributions are valued equally. After I left that evening, driving through the city that had become the backdrop for my transformation, I felt something I'd never experienced before, the power that comes from setting boundaries, not out of cruelty but out of self-respect. Aiden called as I was getting ready for bed. How was the family crisis? Financially complicated, emotionally clarifying, I said, then explained. The evening's conversation, Maya, that sounds incredibly difficult, but also important. It was both, but you know what? Felt different. This time, what I didn't automatically say yes. I thought about what I was willing to give and what I needed in return. That's huge progress. It feels huge too, like I'm finally learning the difference between helping people and letting them use me. Do you think they'll actually respect your boundaries? Honestly, no, I think they'll test them, but I also think I'm finally strong enough to maintain them regardless. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the strange mathematics of family relationships, how love and obligation and resentment could exist in the same space, how learning to say no could actually make relationships more honest. My financial help would solve my parents' immediate crisis, but the emotional boundaries I'd set might solve something more important, the pattern of assuming my needs mattered less than everyone else's comfort. For the first time in my life, I was helping my family from a position of strength, rather than obligation, and that made all the difference between feeling used and feeling genuinely useful. Spring came early that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal that felt both seasonal and personal. My consulting work had expanded beyond crisis management into helping companies build authentic communication from the ground up, and each new project reinforced my growing confidence in abilities I'd spent years doubting. The office Jennifer and I now shared buzzed with activity: 3 full-time consultants, 2 junior associates, and a steady stream of clients who wanted to learn what we called human-centered business communication. It felt surreal sometimes, walking into meetings where my insights were not just welcomed but actively sought. Maya, Jennifer said, one morning reviewing our quarterly projections, going to need to expand again. Good problem to have, I said, looking over the numbers that represented not just business success, but personal validation. You know what I think made this work? She continued, the fact that you never tried to sound like other consultants, you just stayed yourself. Myself used to feel like a liability. I admitted, now it feels like my greatest professional asset, because it is your authenticity is literally what we're selling, and you can't fake that. The conversation was interrupted by my phone buzzing with a text from Emma. Maya, can we meet for coffee soon? The two of us. It had been 3 weeks since our last family gathering where the financial arrangement with our parents had been discussed with strained politeness. Emma had seemed uncomfortable with the new dynamic, where I was no longer automatically available to smooth over family tensions. Clyde, when works for you Saturday afternoon, found us at a coffee shop in the village, sitting across from each other with the careful energy of people trying to rebuild a relationship that had never been quite right to begin with. Maya, Emma said after we'd ordered, I owe you an apology, several apologies for what specifically for years of not seeing you clearly, she said, her voice quieter than usual, for treating your choices like they were lesser versions of the choices I would make, for assuming that because your life looked different from mine it somehow mattered less. That means a lot, Emma. Thank you. She stirred her coffee absently. I've been thinking about what you said at that family dinner about feeling dismissed and overlooked, and I realized you were right. It took courage for her to say that, and I felt some of the old protective walls around my heart start to soften. Didn't realize I was doing it, Emma continued, but I was constantly comparing your life to mine and finding yours wanting instead of trying to understand what made you happy. Why do you think you did that? I asked, genuinely curious, honestly, because it made me feel better about my own choices, she said, with painful honesty. If your life was small and unfulfilling, then my life must be big and meaningful. By comparison, that's a hard thing to admit. It is, but it's true, and it's not fair to you, Maya. You've built something beautiful with your life, something that actually helps people in real ways. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people walk by outside the window, each carrying their own complicated stories, their own family dynamics, their own struggles with being seen and understood. Emma broke the silence. Maya, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you think we can have a real relationship now? Not the performative sister thing we've been doing, but something genuine. I'd like to try, I said, honestly, but it would require both of us being honest about who we actually are, instead of who we think we should be. I think I'm ready for that, Emma said, though I might need practice. Being honest about things that don't make me look good. We all need practice at that, I said, smiling genuinely. For the first time in our conversation, the following week brought news that felt like a culmination of everything that had been building. Harvard Business Review wanted to feature a communication model in their next issue, focusing on how authentic corporate response could rebuild trust in damaged relationships. Sitting in the photographer's studio watching professionals arrange lights and backgrounds for the accompanying photo shoot, I felt a moment of surreal recognition. Was my life now not the life I'd planned, or the life my family had wanted for me, but the life that had grown from staying true to myself even when that truth was inconvenient? Jennifer joined me for the photo portion, grinning as the photographer positioned us with our consulting materials. Maya said between shots, remember when you thought you were just helping David with a small crisis? Feels like a different lifetime, I said, though it's only been 4 months. That's what happens when you stop hiding your real abilities, she said. They multiply exponentially. The article came out 3 later with a photo of me looking confident and professional under the headline, The Authenticity Advantage: How One Consultant's Human-Centered Approach is Changing Corporate Crisis Management. Seeing my words quoted and my methods analyzed felt both thrilling and slightly unreal. My parents called the day the article was published Sundar's voice carrying a pride that sounded more genuine than it had in years. Maya, Beta, we saw the article. You look so professional, so successful. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and meant it. "We never imagined," Lena added, "that our daughter would be featured in such important magazine. Sometimes life surprises us," I said, thinking about all the ways my path had diverged from their expectations. The financial arrangement with my parents had settled into a routine that felt sustainable. They'd stopped making assumptions about my availability and started asking for specific help with clear timelines. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, which felt like progress. Aiden celebrated the article by taking me to dinner at a restaurant far fancier than anywhere we'd eaten together before. "Maya," he said, raising his wine glass to toast, "you've become exactly who you were always meant to be." "Have I?" "Absolutely. You're still the person who cares about people and wants to help them, but now you're doing it from a position of strength instead of obligation. That feels like the key difference," I said, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. Learning to help from strength instead of weakness. The evening ended with us walking through the city talking about dreams and possibilities, and the strange way life could surprise you by revealing gifts you didn't know you had. Back in my apartment that night, I looked around at the space that had witnessed so much transformation. The same walls that had heard me cry after family rejections now surrounded evidence of professional success. The same windows that had framed my uncertainty now looked out on a future full of possibilities. My phone buzzed with a message from David. "Maya, congratulations on the Harvard Business Review feature. Well-deserved recognition." "Thank you, David," I replied, then added, "though I have to say this whole experience has taught me something important about recognition." "What's that?" he wrote back. "The recognition that matters most is the kind you give yourself. Everything else is just confirmation-wise." "Words," he replied, and I realized he was right. They were wise words, but more importantly, they were true words, spoken by someone who'd finally learned the difference between being seen by others and seeing herself clearly. 6 months ago I'd been Maya, the retail worker whose family found her embarrassing. Now I was Maya, the consultant whose authentic communication model was being studied at business schools, but the most important transformation was internal. The shift from seeking validation to creating value, from needing approval to trusting my own judgment. Lying in bed night, I thought about the girl who'd been uninvited from her sister's birthday party, and felt grateful to her for refusing to disappear, for insisting on taking up space, even when that space wasn't welcomed, for believing that her voice mattered, even when no one seemed to be listening, because it turned out that voice had been worth listening to all along. It just needed the right moment, and the right crisis, and the right amount of courage to finally speak loud enough to be heard. The journey from invisible to invaluable hadn't required becoming someone else. It had required becoming more fully myself, and that felt like the most important discovery of all. 6 months after the Harvard Business Review article, Emma called with the kind of urgency that meant family drama was brewing. "Maya, we need to talk," she said, her voice carrying that familiar edge of desperation that usually precedes her quest for emotional labor. "About what?" I asked, though I suspected this was about the consulting firm's latest expansion, the one that had attracted venture capital interest. "About us. About the family, about this whole situation," she said, as if my success was a situation rather than an achievement. "You meet me tonight." The restaurant she chose was expensive, the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones, over wine that cost more than most people's daily wages. Emma arrived looking perfectly put together, but something in her eyes suggested the polish was hiding cracks. "Maya," said once we'd ordered, "I need you to understand something. This whole consulting thing, it's changing everything." "Everything? Like what?" "Like how people see our family, like the dynamics we've always had." She leaned forward. "David's colleagues treat you like you're more important than me now, and that bothers you." "Yes, it bothers me," Emma said, her voice sharp, "because it's not natural. Maya, you're the younger sister, you're supposed to be the one looking up to me." "According to who?" I asked, genuinely confused. "According to how things have always been. According to the order of things." "Emma,
The order of things you're talking about was never real, it was just a story you told yourself to feel better about dismissing me. That's not fair, isn't it? Because what you're really saying is that my success threatens your sense of superiority. Emma's face flushed. Maya, you're being cruel. Am I, or am I being honest about what this conversation is really about? Look, she said, trying a different approach. We could work together. You could bring your consulting firm into David's company. We could be partners. Partners. I repeated the word, feeling its weight. Yes, equal partners. Both of us contributing to something big, except we wouldn't be equal partners, would we, Emma? I'd be the consultant you brought in to make yourself look innovative. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. And the answer is no. Why not? Emma demanded. This could be good for both of us. Because I've spent my entire life being a supporting character, Emma, and I'm not interested in that role anymore. Maya, please. No, Emma, I said, standing up from the table. I've built something that's mine, something that comes from who I actually am, not who I think I should be, and I'm not giving that up to make you more comfortable with family hierarchy. The conversation ended with Emma sitting alone at an expensive restaurant, while I walked out into the New York night, feeling lighter than I had in years. The final thread connecting me to old patterns of family obligation had been cut, not with anger but with clarity. 1 year later, I stood in the same boutique where I'd once steamed silk blouses, now visiting as a customer, buying something beautiful for myself, not because I needed to impress anyone but because I wanted to celebrate. The consulting firm had opened offices in 3 cities. We'd trained executives at Fortune 500 companies, and I'd been invited to speak at conferences about authentic leadership. The girl who wasn't good enough for birthday parties was now helping reshape how businesses communicated with the world. Maya, a familiar voice called, and I turned to see Maria, my former manager, beaming at me. Look, she said, pulling me into a hug. I always knew you were destined for something bigger. Did you? I asked, smiling. Because I'm not sure I did. Absolutely, she said. You had this way of really seeing people, of making them feel heard even when they were being difficult. That's rare. Walking home through the city streets, I thought about how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. I was still Maya, who cared about people, who wanted to help, who believed in honesty over convenience, but now those qualities felt like strengths rather than weaknesses. My phone buzzed with a text from Aiden. Tonight, to celebrate the new contract. Always, I replied, because some things never change. And shouldn't? That evening, sitting across from my best friend in our favorite restaurant, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from building a life that actually fits. You know what? I realized today. I told Aiden what I spent so many years trying to prove: I was worthy of love and respect, that I forgot to notice I was already worthy. Profound realization, he said, grinning. How does it feel? Like coming home to myself, I said. Like finally understanding that the person I was trying to become was just the person I already was, waiting for permission to be seen. Permission you never actually needed. Exactly, permission I never actually needed. Outside the restaurant window, New York City hummed with its endless energy, millions of people living their own complicated stories, their own journeys from invisible to essential, and I felt grateful to be part of that vast human experiment of becoming who you're meant to be. Walking home alone, but not lonely, I thought about the girl who'd hung up on her mother after being uninvited from a family party, and felt proud of her for refusing to disappear, for insisting on her own worth even when no one else could see it. Because it turned out that worth had been there all along, waiting not for external validation but for internal recognition, waiting for the moment when I stopped asking permission to matter and started mattering simply because I existed. The light of the city stretched endlessly ahead, full of possibility and promise, and for the first time in my life I felt completely at home in my own story. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.